morning. Thank you for signing up for our very first live webinar. We are doing this one because we know that there's a general skills shortage in the UK, especially in IT. And companies often tell us that keeping hold of their staff is a concern. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk about it. So the name of this webinar is 4 easy ways that you can use to drastically improve staff retention and save money on recruitment fees in the process, mainly by making less use of recruitment companies. So before we go any further, some things to note. Firstly, this webinar is aimed mainly for people who look after teams of permanent staff. We supply contractors too, of course, but we're not really talking about those today. Secondly, this is a live webinar, so bear with us if we have any hiccups. And finally, we'll have a Q&A session at the end if we have time, but we're aiming to keep the whole thing to half an hour, so we'll see how we get on. So who are we? My name is Matt Byrne, I'm here on the left, and I'm one of the original founders of Blues Point. My background is in accountancy, and I look after the legal and financial side of things here at Blues Point, as well as working directly on high-level recruitment projects. Blues Point, by the way, is an IT recruitment company founded 16 years ago. We're based in Burton-on-Trent, home of brewing in the UK. We have clients all over the place. They choose to work with us because we have very thorough recruitment processes, and our aim, as well as theirs, is to get people to stay for the long term, which is unusual for a company like ours.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Alex Hamford. I'm the chap on the right, and I've been in recruitment for well over 20 years, and my background is in business and sales. I'm the main key account manager here at Blues Point, and I look after most of the recruitment operations here. And we make extensive use of the latest recruitment tools, so things like behavioural assessments, video interviewing. Because we use these tools, our clients have a far higher staff retention rate when they use competitor agencies, and we'll talk about some of these later in the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So this webinar is the result of our combined 40 years of recruitment experience, but we've tried to distill it down to about 30 minutes, plus the questions at the end if we can squeeze them in. So this is what we'll be covering today. Firstly, what happens if you don't focus on keeping hold of your staff? Spoiler alert, it's expensive and stressful. Second thing is laying the foundations. We'll talk briefly about why people leave their jobs and why it's easier to keep people if you recruit correctly in the first place. But then after that, the 4 headline ways that we are recommending today, which are: number 1, getting the onboarding process right; number 2, giving and receiving trust and respect for your people; number 3, investing in your people; and the final one is getting to know your workforce. Sound obvious, but there's plenty more to see behind the scenes there. There are plenty of other ways as well, but as we only have half an hour, we'll focus on these, and we'll talk a bit more about each of them in turn. You will, of course, want to keep listening to the end of the webinar, but as an added incentive, we are giving away a free gift, as seen on the screen there. It's a product that we're currently selling on our website for £125. So why are we giving it away for nothing? Because most clients get so much value from it that they come back and buy some more, although there's no obligation to do that. I'll explain more later. And you need to be listening live in order to receive this, but it's a win-win situation because of all the excellent content that we are going to talk to you about.
Thanks, Matt. So the fact that you're on this webinar indicates that you see the value in improving staff retention levels, but it's worth reiterating why this is so important. So companies with high levels of engagement have a turnover rate of 40% lower than their counterparts who have low staff engagement levels. But the UK has an employee engagement deficit. So survey after survey indicates that only around 1/3 of UK workers say they are engaged, a figure which leaves the UK ranked 9th for engagement levels amongst the world's 12 largest economies. So most companies are not engaging their workforce effectively, and 2/3 of their staff are probably considering looking for a job. And if you ever had a staff member leave you unexpectedly, especially if it's one of your go-to people, you know the amount of trouble it causes. And if you're like most managers, you won't have an effective succession plan in place, and there'll be an element of panic about your reaction.
Yes, true. And that panic can translate into a knee-jerk counteroffer. We do not, by the way, recommend making a counteroffer as a way of retaining staff because it's too late by then. They can work sometimes, but it's almost always short-term. If you do need somebody to stay for a short period of time, you're taken by surprise by the resignation, then it's fair enough, but will cost you. We once had a client who needed their employee so badly for a particular project that they doubled his salary from £40,000 to £80,000 to keep him there for another 6 months.
Wow. So what would you do if your top member was recruited by another company and handed in their notice tomorrow? And do you have a plan in place to stop this happening? If not, you're in the right place, and I hope this webinar will help you with that plan. Finally, think about this. Our clients engage us to find them the best talent available, and they don't care how we do it. The best candidates are usually working for a competitor, and we're very good at headhunting people, especially if they're not happy for any reason.
And it's worth pointing out, Alex, that these days it's very easy to find a job if you're good at what you do. For example, if an experienced developer, let's say a .NET developer, registers their CV online, they are likely to receive dozens of calls within the first day, I guess, from interested recruiters.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Matt. So remember, your competitors are hiring companies like us to poach your staff. So the next slide shows the main reasons why people are unhappy in their work, according to the latest Investors in People survey. So you can see here the top three are looking for more money, looking for more enjoyable work, and feeling that their skills and talents are undervalued. But people don't usually leave jobs just for one reason. It's a whole combination. So being slightly underpaid isn't enough on its own, but when combined with a lack of career progression, it can trigger someone to start looking for a new job.
It can, and it's worth mentioning too that the same report found that the top two reasons for people to stay in their jobs are having a good work-life balance and being part of a good team.
Yeah, and adding all this up leads to the conclusion that it's a complex picture, and you can't just keep people happy just by paying them more money, although it will help. But first things first, recruitment. You might think that we're cheating here because the webinar is about retention, not recruitment. But it's so important that we thought it's worth talking about just for a couple of minutes anyway. So it's essential to have a solid recruitment process if you want high retention rates. You want to attract people who fit into your team, who have the right behaviours, and who share your values.
And if you don't have those things, the candidate is not a long-term prospect.
Yeah. And each one of these points on this slide is worth an entire webinar on its own. But here are some of the main considerations you may want to think about. So spend time on the job description by having a clear outline of the skills that your ideal candidate needs. And by the way, only deal with recruitment companies who spend time talking through the job description with you. The more questions they ask, the better. Don't waste your time looking for unicorns. In other words, don't try to recruit the perfect candidate with every bit of experience you need. They don't really exist. And if you do happen to find one, they will outgrow the role very fast.
Yeah, this is true. It's very important on this. If you get someone who's perfect for the role, they've got nowhere to go. They've nowhere to grow in, nothing to grow into. If you really do need somebody to hit the ground running, a permanent person may not be the answer. Instead, consider hiring somebody on a contract basis in the meantime.
Yep, I agree with that. And make use of modern recruitment tools like video interviewing and technical and behavioural assessments. And these will give you evidence of technical competence and cultural fit. We use them all the time because they work. And we can talk about these later. You should prioritise attitude over skills. Skills can be learned, but attitude or behaviours can't.
And over the years, yes, we found this to be very true. Our clients hire people on skills and they fire them on attitude.
Yep, that's very true, Matt. So be patient, but not complacent. In other words, don't rush the recruitment process. Don't hang about if you find a good candidate because they'll probably be in high demand elsewhere. So someone who has most of the skills you need and who ticks the behaviours box isn't going to be hanging around for very long. And finally, use the services of a specialist recruitment agency. You can do the work yourself, obviously, but for specialist roles or where you might be overwhelmed by the response, a recruitment agency's fee will be worth the investment many times over.
Do you know any good ones, Alex?
I can think of one, Matt.
Okay. We talking of overwhelmed by response, we recently recruited an IT director role in the Midlands, and we had over 250 applications. And of course, we want to give everyone appropriate feedback, look at their CV properly. It took us absolutely weeks to look through all these and draw up a shortlist. So if you don't want to do that, then an external recruitment agency is what you might need. So anyway, on to the main event. Point 1 on the screen, it says here, is to do with onboarding. If you get this right, everything else follows a bit more naturally. So what is onboarding? Well, we think it is the process of integrating a new employee into your organization. And whether you know it or not, this process starts before you offer someone the job. Why so early? Because the experience of the recruitment process will color their impression of you as an employer. So if it's been smooth all the way, good communication and prompt feedback, for example, you're off to an excellent start. But if it hasn't been that way, and by the way, most recruitment processes are not so smooth, you have some work to do. Next slide here speaks for itself, really. Basically, if you get the onboarding right, you will dramatically improve retention rates and levels of productivity.
And by the way, this is according to Glassdoor, which, if you're not aware, is a site where employees can review their employers. So it's worth looking at your company. There may be some revealing comments on there. Most are constructive, but some are not. For example, one we found was a company, a law firm in California, not a client of ours, thank God, called Layfield and Wallace, and they have the following reviews on their site: deceptive, unethical, poorly managed, no sense of direction. Working here is psychological torture, and new admittees beware.
Not a client of ours.
Not a client of ours.
No. So how can you improve your onboarding process? Firstly, it says here, maintain regular but not excessive contact. Before they start work, we're talking about, and during their notice period, if they have one. So maintain regular contact with them. Send them a couple of emails maybe, give them a phone call, post them some reading materials perhaps. We even had a client who played squash with their candidate who was on a 3-month notice period, I remember. That was a good way of getting them involved. Be also aware of the risk of the counteroffer. If this person is any good, their employer is likely to want to keep hold of them, so they'll play on their sense of loyalty and probably offer them more money to stay. As we said before, a bad idea for retention, but it might work in the short term. And the two most vulnerable times for this are just after they've handed in their notice, when the employer is in panic mode, and towards the end of the notice period when they think all danger has passed. But it hasn't. So do not forget about your employees before they start.
And it's worth pointing out that at Blues Point, we do this for all of our placements, because the last thing we want is for a counter offer to be accepted.
Yes, that's true. And following on, the next point is to make them part of the team. Things like copying them into relevant team emails, inviting them in for a tour of the office, including them on a team night out, not too raucous, but just something where they can meet people. The more psychologically involved they feel at this stage, the better it is. And the less likely that they will accept a counteroffer too. Third point, basic. So basic, but often overlooked. Get things ready for when they arrive. Set up their PC, their phone, their email, their logins, things like that. I remember one instance a few years ago when one of our candidates arrived on day one. I think it was a large company in Birmingham.
Yeah.
It was, and no one was aware of this, apart from one person in HR who wasn't even in. This was not a good start, and we and they learned a few lessons that day. Okay, and finally, continue the onboarding for as long as it takes. In other words, carry on looking after them until they are fully integrated, at which point other retention techniques take over, let's say, until the end of their probation period.
Thanks, Matt. So the next tip, number 2, is trust and respect. So it's very important for employees to feel valued in the workplace. Trusting and respecting your employees can bring big benefits for your organisation and for your workers. After all, they're adults, so treat them as such. And if you do, everything should improve. You might get people who take advantage of any new privileges that you offer. But if you do, it might be a sign that they're not right for your team. So firstly, a big no-no is micromanaging people. You should trust employees to do their job. If you're looking over someone's shoulder all of the time, the following is definitely going to happen. Morale will be reduced, so will productivity. People will take fewer risks, so there's less room for innovation and good ideas. And they're more likely to leave for another company where they are respected.
Yes, we recently placed somebody who left his previous company for that exact reason. And he was a good guy, wasn't he? And he's put us in touch with 2 of his ex-colleagues who are also looking for work. Good news for us, but bad news for that company. So in our experience, micromanagement is massively counterproductive.
Yeah, and those candidates are very good. So I think we will place them elsewhere. So related to this issue is work-life balance. Now, remember, this was the number 1 reason why people stay in jobs. So this is how to improve that. So offer your staff the chance to work flexibly or remotely. And by the way, if you don't do this, you're behind the curve, because more and more clients are doing it. Also, every employee in the UK has the statutory right to request flexible working after 26 weeks of employment. And employers must have a sound business reason for rejecting any request. And next, what does your company consider more important, productivity or time? So give praise and reward for achievement and not for time spent in front of a PC.
This reminds me of my time working for a large accountancy practice in London, where the longer the hours you worked, the better it was. And it went, in fact, some people kept a spare jacket on the back of their chair to give the impression that they were still working at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not me, I didn't do that.
So as mentioned above, recognise your employees as individuals because everyone's circumstances are different. And finally, lead by example. If you as the leader are in the office from dawn until midnight, your employees will feel pressure to do the same. So consider your own working arrangements. You never know, you might end up being more productive as well. And it's worth noting that these changes need to come from the top. So it can be difficult to achieve, but there are solid business reasons for doing so. An extreme example of this is Netflix. So everyone is aware of Netflix. And this is what the companies say on the company culture section of their website. Use good judgment is our core precept. Our vacation policy is take vacation. Our policy for travel, entertainment, gifts, and other expenses is 5 words long. Act in Netflix best interest.
So a good example of them trusting their employees. So this leads us on to our third point, which is to do with investing in your people. And we mean in both in terms of money and in time. This section is all about making people feel valued. So in the words of the famous desert island dwelling space explorer Richard Branson, train people well enough so that they can leave, but treat them well enough so that they don't want to.
And another one that just springs to mind is the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. Imagine that. And that one is by Henry Ford.
But if there's a risk of them leaving at all, you might be asking yourself, why should you bother investing? Better surely just to keep them doing the same job they always did. Well, the statistics on the screen might open your eyes a little bit. In that survey, referenced there, none of the companies spending above average £300 on training per employee had a retention rate of less than 6 months. And companies who spent above average on training are twice as likely to say that their employees are highly satisfied.
So that £300 statistic is very interesting, I think, because you only have to invest a relatively small amount of money to beat the average, and the return is likely to be worth it. So in terms of obviously in terms of retention and overall satisfaction, and obviously these two are closely linked.
Okay. Next one is an odd thing for a recruitment company to recommend perhaps, but promoting your existing employees before recruiting externally can be very beneficial. For starters, it's cheaper, no recruitment fee there, but the cultural benefits are significant too. People who know that there's a genuine career path at your company are likely to perform better and be more loyal with all that in mind. But remember to recognise potential and behaviours when considering people for promotion. Because if they don't have all the right skills yet, that's okay. You can train them up, but you can't train them in behaviours. But make sure you spend at least £300 on the training.
Yes, so to bear in mind that Blues Point have been engaged to work with clients to validate if they've got a number of internal candidates that they are considering for maybe a leadership role, but they want to use the behavioural tools that we have access to understand, have they got the right behaviours to engage and lead that team. So this allows them to make the best decision, an objective decision, and they obviously then have the data to share with the candidates as to why they made that decision. So obviously there are if you can't find the person internally, look externally. Use a recruitment company if you need to. External people bring new ideas, a fresh perspective, but the message is do not overlook your existing team.
Yeah. So how can you start investing more in your staff? Well, it starts just by being aware of it, being aware of the options. Think about ways you can offer opportunities for training and development. Indeed, you can invite employees to identify their own training courses. You can consider allowing employees some time to pursue personal development projects. One of our clients, a very good employer, I think, gives each employee 2 hours per week for this, to do what they want. And this is a very popular option. Some people choose to study, others do an exercise class, that kind of thing. The final thing is to offer free, or nearly free anyway, team building and morale boosting events. These do not have to be expensive at all. It's the thought that counts here. There's a big return on investment when you do this kind of thing.
And our final point is to do with getting to know your workforce. So it sounds obvious, but what does this mean? So it's most basic level, we mean that it's important to talk to your staff on an informal basis to find out how they're getting on. It's particularly important if you have remote workers or teams in a different location. If you want to make a real difference, though, it pays to use a bit of science. We encourage the use of technical tests and psychometric assessments, and we can talk about these in a bit more detail.
But be warned, these tests can be very powerful, but if you're going to use them in your team, you need to communicate the reasons why. It's important that your people see these kind of things in a positive way as a development aid, which is what they are, and not as a threat.
Yeah, you definitely need to get buy-in from the team.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the technical tests first. So if you employ technical people, you'll have a good idea, or you should have a good idea of their level of technical skill, but do you have any evidence to back this up? So some of our clients use technical tests, not just for recruitment purposes, but also to benchmark their current staff. They use the results to help identify training needs. So investing in training signals to your people that you value them, and this increases retention rates, as we know. And as the slide says, you can assess people in any key areas relevant to their role. There are literally hundreds of off-the-shelf assessments available. You can create bespoke tests that reflect exactly what you want to test. You get a report like the one on the right that breaks down the result by subject area. They're really useful. We're an authorised supplier if you want to try one out.
Yeah, we use those all the time, actually. Next thing is psychometric assessments. We use the suite of products that are developed by Thomas International, both in our recruitment processes and for clients who wish to develop and keep their employees. So these assessments will help you understand your employees a lot better so that you know how to get the best out of them and where they will be best placed in your organization. There's a lot to go into here. We don't have time for that, so we'll just talk very briefly about each, the four main ones that we use. The first one is GIA, General Intelligence. You can see the results of that on the right. It's quite small, but it measures lots of different metrics there, and it gives information about how quickly people pick up on new information. Very useful one. PPA is the next one. This is the one we use most of the time. You may notice a DISC profile. This one deals with the person's behaviours. It's extremely accurate, and multiple reports can be drawn from it. We use it in most recruitment projects, and we provide a how to manage report when the new candidate starts work. The third one is HPTI. This one is used a bit less, but it's very useful when it is used. It helps identify individuals with the potential to go to the top in your organization. If you have someone you would like to recommend for promotion, this report will give you the evidence to back that up if you're talking to the board, for example. And the final one, becoming more and more popular as people become aware of it, emotional intelligence. Got some odd questions coming in here. Not sure what these are. We'll talk about that later, perhaps. I'll carry on with the webinar here. Emotional intelligence is especially important for people in management or leadership roles. Remember, just asking your people to sit one of these assessments will help. If your employees perceive that you are making an effort to understand them as individuals, they will feel more valued and will respond positively to that.
And the final assessment we use is perhaps the most directly relevant to the retention topic we're talking about today, and that's a product called Motivational Maps. So this will give you an insight into someone's true motivators. They're a very effective way of measuring two things. What motivates someone? Are they mainly motivated by money, responsibility, friendship, creativity, for example? And how motivated are they against motivators? Do they have enough opportunity to be creative in their role? Are they in a management role when taking responsibility for others is their lowest motivator? And once you know this, you can tailor your management style to the individual. So you can also change the way that you target and incentivize them so that specific motivators are addressed. If you use a motivational map and actually take action based on what it says, you're virtually guaranteed to increase your retention rates. They're a very powerful tool, and we recommend that they're used for all candidates that we place just before they come to the end of their probationary period. It makes it more likely they will stay for the long term, which is, after all, what we're looking for.
Yeah. Which brings us neatly onto the free gift that we mentioned earlier on. We are an accredited reseller of motivational maps, and we actually sell them on our website for £125 each. But we're going to give one away for free to each UK-based person who's on the webinar today. And we do this because we believe that they're very valuable, and some of the people who use one today might be interested in coming back to us and getting some more. But there's no obligation to do this. You're welcome just to have the report for your own amusement and use. And to claim it, click on the link that we'll give you in a couple of minutes. I think it's also, is it in the comments yet? Maybe. Yes, there is.
Yeah, and as an added bonus, we're also offering a free 30-minute recruitment audit to the first 5 people who get in touch after this webinar. So again, there's no obligation here, but we can talk to you about your current recruitment process how it compares to other companies in your sector, your onboarding techniques and how they might be improved, and ways we think you could improve staff retention. And to claim this, just click on the same link and which we'll give you in a couple of minutes.
Right, thanks, Alex. So that's the main part of the webinar over, and let's see if we have any questions on the. Can we go and see the questions here? So we go to the top. Okay, some of these questions are a little off topic, perhaps. I think British public. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions here that are exactly relevant to this topic here. But here's one come up at the bottom. Okay, what's from Ian? Hello, Ian. What's your advice for retaining people in a flat structure? We've had a couple of team members leave due to lack of progression, but I feel like we were very honest with them at their interview about what's on offer. Okay, thanks, Ian. So, I suppose one way of addressing that question is to go back to the interview and say, what did you say at the interview? If you were very honest with them, it's possible that they weren't actually listening. That people hear what they want to hear at an interview time, and because they really want to have the job. But it's too late for that. So once the recruitment process is done and they're in place, I suppose we would recommend using these motivational maps to measure their motivation. Somebody who is motivated only by career progression or managing a team isn't going to be right for you, perhaps. But you can look at the other motivators that they have and maybe address those. An open and honest conversation, I think, is the main thing to do. But if you understand their motivators, then you can address those as well. And the motivational map, sorry to keep plugging it, but it is actually very useful for this kind of thing. It will give you an indication of what makes them want to stay and progress and what doesn't. So if progression is their main thing that they want, they may not be in the right place at all. Okay. We have no other questions, I don't think. Oh, one more, sorry. Dan, hello, Dan. I manage a team, and I've inherited a manager who's not a particularly good people manager. He was promoted into the role last year, I think because he's been in with the business a long time. He's good at the technical aspects of his role, but seems to be upsetting team members. Oh dear. I want to retain him in the business, but I don't think he's going to be happy if we start taking responsibility away from him. What's your advice? Okay, good question. Thank you. Okay, so you've inherited a manager. You didn't promote him into this role. He was promoted last year. Okay, so just being in the business a long time is not enough to be promotion, is it?
Maybe you need some coaching about. Well, I would when we've seen this sort of behaviour before, what we generally would suggest is that you may want to get the individual to sit a behavioural assessment to help them understand their behaviour, so they're self-aware, they can understand their impact on other people. Obviously, you need to get the buy-in from them to do that. And obviously, so they don't see it as a threat, but they see it as a positive thing, because if you're we're all adults here, aren't we? So we want it to work. We want to retain this person in the business. So I would get them to sit a behavioural assessment, whether that's going to be a PPA or something similar, probably using DISC, and that will probably give you understanding about that person's training needs, how they behave with other people. Share that, get a practitioner, DISC practitioner to share that information with them, and then move on from there.
But even I suppose taking it one step further back, have you had regular chats with this person about how he's getting on with his new responsibilities? It's possible that he's already realised that he's not the right person for the role, and he might be grateful for you to bring it up. So you could, you could have a frank chat about it. Okay. Thanks, Victoria, for that comment. That's good. Okay. I hope that's helpful. We've come to the half an hour point here. If you look gone to the next slide here. Okay, so the final one is, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks,
if you look at the link there, you can go and you can claim your free gift and motivational map and the audit if you want it. So thank you very much for listening. We hope it was useful for you. We'll send you a link of the recording later. Please feel free to let us know if you have any feedback, good or bad. We welcome any feedback.
Any constructive feedback.
Yeah. It's our first live one, as you know, so I hope it was okay. So thank you again, and goodbye.
Great, thanks, bye.